welcome back to the channel. My name is Pallavi. How you doing? I have a very busy day ahead. I'm getting ready for a flight that I have in like 2 days. I am going to Mauritius to see my family, my parents. My brother and I are going there together, and I have a lot of things to get done today before we go. Most of my clothes are packed, so that's done. I need to double check what I need to bring for my mom. I need to clean up the house a little bit. We need to use up all the food in the fridge in the next 2 days, which I don't think will be that hard. There's not that much in the fridge at the moment. I'm also thinking of going for a run today just to like try it. I've been avoiding it because of my knee rehab situation that's happening here, but I want to give it a shot today. My knee's been feeling really good for the past little while, so I just want to like try out a run, a really small one. We'll see how it goes. And I do want to get out and go for a walk as well too at some point. I've been so sedentary for the past couple of days. I was sick. You can still kind of hear it in my nose. I'm still a little bit nasally, but generally speaking, I'm pretty much back to normal. I just have to like get this last bit of cold out, and I think the run will help with that. I'm gonna get to doing all of that. You already saw me do my yoga this morning. I'm getting back on the yoga train. Look at me go. My physiotherapist recommended it. We're doing yoga for the knee. I'm also not gonna be able to go to the gym very much when I'm in Mauritius, so we're switching to yoga and hopefully a little bit of running. We'll see how today's run goes, and if it goes okay, then I might continue that in Mauritius. I also want to talk to you a little bit about managing stress in med school. It looks like I have a monstera crown coming out of my head. You can totally hear everything going on inside, can't you? I'm gonna close this door. I think it's really hard to talk about managing mental health and stress levels during the school year, because my mindset during the school year is very much like, get through it. Go, keep going, keep going, keep going. I didn't want that to trickle in to the conversation here, basically. I figured I'd talk about it now that school is over and I have the benefit of hindsight with me as well. Let me begin by saying that I don't have the best track record when it comes to stress management. I used to be really bad about it, and even now I struggle, but I have to say I've gotten a lot better over the past couple of years. The beginning of med school for me was really tough. 4 to 6 weeks in, and I was really struggling with my mental health. This was because the workload was so intense that I couldn't think of anything outside the workload. I was just in the mode of studying all the time. So when I was spending time with my family, just having a conversation, going for a walk, or having like an online date with some friends or anything, I wasn't really present. I wasn't really self-aware. I wasn't there. Like, I wasn't there in the conversation. I wasn't there in the walk. I was just thinking about school all the time. So all our conversations ended up being really dry. It would be like one-word answers for me. They weren't good conversations. They weren't quality time spent properly. I'd also found myself getting into like a self-pity spiral of getting really overwhelmed, really stressed, and it was just getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and I was becoming less and less of me and more of like an overworked Pallavi. I was so wrapped up in everything that I was doing and the stress that I was dealing with at the time that I couldn't see what was happening. And this was the case with, again, everybody in my life. Like, my family will attest to the fact that I was a menace to be around, and sometimes I can still be quite uncomfortable to be around. Let me just be very clear. But once I got called out on it though, I started paying a little bit more attention to it, and I noticed the things that would trigger my stress. I noticed the things that would make me more uncomfortable. I noticed what things helped me, like what kind of support really helped me during the hard times, and I think that really made things a little bit easier to manage. I don't like inconveniencing other people, so that was my primary motivator for becoming more self-aware, and I do think that had a huge impact on how much better I've gotten at managing my stress. Excuse the pile of crap I have next to me. I'm still packing for my trip. It's gonna be a little bit messy. My bad. The biggest thing that helps you deal with stress is figuring out what's causing it, and sometimes this can be the hardest part. There have been a few occasions where I've been so ridiculously stressed and to the point where I can't breathe properly. I'm barely functioning as like a social being. All I can manage is the bare minimum, and I'm like close to tears all the time, or angry all the time. The biggest thing for stress management for me has been figuring out what's causing my stress. And sometimes this can be the hardest part. There have been occasions where I've been really stressed out, like ridiculously stressed out, but I can't figure out why. And this could go on for a really long time. Usually it's because of how anxious I am. So much so that even addressing my stress, even addressing my anxiety, gives me like a visceral, like complete response from my body, just being like, no, don't go there. Absolutely not. So sometimes it takes time, and that's okay. It's inconvenient, but it's okay. But figuring out what's causing the problem is the only, in my opinion, I think the only thing you can do if you want like a quick solution to like all your problems being gone. Once you figured out what the problem is, I highly, highly, highly suggest that you tackle it head on. That's my preferred method for dealing with these kind of things, and I do find it works really well. I used to be the type of person that would put it off because it was just making me anxious for a really long time, but now I find that if I figure out what's causing my anxiety, deal with it right away, and my anxiety disappears. Like I still feel stressed, but I'm not anxious anymore. I'm not worried about my stress. To give an example, I had a period this past year, I want to say it's about like a couple months, maybe 2 months, where biochemistry was just kicking my butt. I don't know what it was about this course. Like it just took me so much time to understand and like absorb the material, and this was causing me so much stress because I wasn't working at my normal pace. Things were taking me a little bit longer, and that was giving me so much stress as like lectures piled up one on top of the other that I like hadn't gotten to. The further along I got and the more behind I got, the higher my anxiety went, and I just found that I was anxious all the time. For like a 4 to 5 week period, I was anxious all the time. And this was one of those moments where I couldn't figure out what was going on. I knew that there was a problem. I knew it wasn't home. I didn't want to admit the fact that it was school stressing me out because I've been so good about managing school stress for so long. So I didn't want to admit it, but eventually I did. It took a long time though. It took a lot of just like patience and just accepting stress first, accepting the anxiety, before finally addressing it. Once I did though, you better believe that course became my bitch. I created a whole new plan for all the lectures that I'd either missed or I didn't understand really well, and it was really well organized. I created very specific tasks and scheduled them into my study plan in a very realistic way. I didn't want to overwhelm myself. I didn't want to put too much on my plate right off the bat and then get discouraged because I'd done that already. Didn't work. Anxiety. So it took a while to catch up. It took about 2 or 3 months to completely catch up. By the time I did though, it was the end of the year. I was completely caught up on biochemistry, and that course ended up being like the course I was most prepared for out of all of them. And I, to this day, still remember a lot of those concepts, even like months after, maybe not months, even a month after the exam is over. Now I think it's also important to address what to do when you figured out what your problem is, you've dealt with your anxiety, you've confronted your demons, but you realize that your problem has no solution. And in these cases, I do think it's really, really important to be just gentle with yourself. And with these cases, I do think it's really, really important to just be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself, and lower your expectations on what you think you can get done, on your productivity levels, because your mind just needs a rest. Your mind is already dealing with a lot in those times, and with something that doesn't really have a definitive end, with a problem that might not ever have a solution. So I do think it's important to be kind to yourself. The burnout associated with overwhelming amounts of work versus a problem that has no solution can look very different. For me, being really overwhelmed with course load looks like me being anxious and unable to connect and just frazzled and not very social. When I'm dealing with a problem that doesn't really have a solution, I feel anger. And I've never really realized it up until the point that I started making this video, but there is a clear distinction between problems that have a solution, problems that don't have a solution, and the way I react to them. So I encountered a situation like this in first year where I met with a problem that didn't really have a solution. I was doing this course and it was issues not related to the course load or the course itself. It was a fun course, but I was just really upset with the way that it was handled, and I found myself angry for weeks. I didn't deal with it well, and this was negatively impacting the course itself and my performance in it. I had gotten great marks up until that point, and then when I started getting angry, when I started feeling this like level of frustration with this course, I did find that I started failing exams like one after the other. The way I got myself out of it was by sharing what I was feeling. First of all, I went up to my classmates. We had a lab for another course. We were in a break, and I remember opening up to them and telling them I'm feeling angry all the time, like all the time, and I don't know what to do about it. They very much suggested that I just take the day off, and up until that point I hadn't taken an entire day off, like ever. Once med school started, my idea of time off was very specific. I started dividing the day up into like morning, afternoon, and evenings, and I could only have one of those off in a day, period. That's it. So it was really good for my productivity. I got a lot of work done, but once I hit this like wall of frustration, this wall of anger where I just could not move forward, it wasn't working for me anymore. So I did what they suggested. I did my Anki as usual because that is my non-negotiable every single day. But I took the rest of the day off. I laid here in this bed, in this room, the entire day and watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it was glorious. It was the break I really needed. I needed it to decompress and just calm my nervous system down long enough to find something else that would work for me. After that, I actually started listening to a medical podcast that was not related to the course itself, but it would like reference the course and the course material from time to time, just because it's like med school, everything relates to everything. And this wasn't intentional, I just happened to pick up this podcast. And it ended up being a really good idea because I found that the information I was learning in the podcast was very similar to what I was learning in the course. And that made me realize that all this effort that I've been putting into this course that has been giving me a lot of trouble is worth it. Everything that I'm learning in this course that's frustrating the crap out of me is worth it because it's useful and it matters. That validation that my hard work had paid off and that I was doing something that mattered really motivated me. It gave me the energy and the drive again, and it reminded me how much I love medicine. Now, this was just an example of what I needed at the time. Every situation is different, of course, and the stress management, I think, really requires nuance. It's also why I feel not that many people talk about it in a lot of specific detail. What I'm trying to show you, though, is that for problems that you can't do anything about, it's better to just take a step back, recuperate, take a breath. Alright, well, that's my 2 cents on stress management, guys. I hope that was helpful for you. I hope that it provided you with a little bit of insight into how I deal with things, definitely, and a new perspective for you as well. I have a lot to get done for this trip. So I'm gonna get started. It's not as bad as it could be. I remember traveling to Mauritius last year with all the COVID restrictions. Oh my god, that was an absolute nightmare. This is not as bad, but I do have a lot of things to do and I do have to get to it, and I will do that now. Thanks for watching, guys. If you liked this video, if you like this channel, subscribe, maybe hit that like, and I will see you again in the next one. Bye!